Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video we're going to learn about accruals. We are going to cover accruals in three different parts. First part, that is today's video, we're going to cover the setup of accruals, that is the different building blocks that we have under accruals. In part 2 we're going to create and test few accrual policies, and in part 3 we're going to learn few more concepts about accruals. So if you are ready, let's get started. So under your setup you have accruals, and these are the building blocks that we are going to cover in today's session. Before I take you through all of these, I would like to tell you that the way accruals work is slightly different as compared to what we have seen in the earlier course. If you have followed my 20 days of Kronos configuration where we went through the pay codes to pay rules, I feel personally that though pay policies can also be complex, but they do not have much of logical thinking. What I mean by that is this can be a little straightforward. For example, if you want to create overtime greater than 8 hours a day or 40 hours in a week, you can simply go to overtimes building block. Or if you want to create a shift def, you can go to zones and give the start and end time. So there is not much there is complexity under pay policies as well, but more of logical thinking is something that you will find for accruals, because accruals are not straightforward. So let me tell you that you would need some reasoning, you would need some logical thinking when you have to define or come up with some solution for your projects or for the clients that you're working with. And before I get into each of this building block, let me tell you that once you create the accrual policies, this has to be assigned. So let me show you where you assign the accrual profile. So accrual profile is the last piece in terms of the configuration. Once you create the accrual profile, you have to attach it to the employee in the people editor. This is the same place where we have attached the pay rule, if you remember earlier. And now under your people editor, if you expand accruals and leave, this is the accrual profile. This is the accrual profile. Once you create that, you need to attach it under the accruals and leave. And as of now, we haven't created anything because this is the very first session that we are going to go through, and we're going to create accrual policy. So by next session, which is part 2 of this 3 part session, you will see a couple of accrual profiles here so that you can select and you can see how it works. So once you assign this accrual profile to the employee, you can see that under the time cards there will be, usually you can create a accruals tab, and here you can see the accruals information based on the policies that you have created. But again, as of now we don't have anything because there is nothing that is assigned. The reason that there is nothing that is assigned because we haven't created anything. So with that note, let's get started and go into the very first building block about accruals, and that is going to be accrual codes. Okay, so let's click on new. Now the first thing and the most important thing that I usually tell everyone is not just for accruals, anything that you create in your Kronos configuration, the most important piece, the first thing that you will have to do is to give a name, and the naming convention plays a very important role here, just like across the other setup as well. So if you're creating an accrual code for example vacation, so make sure you give the name. At the same time, if you are working for a particular country, make sure you also put that country's prefix so that if you're working on multiple countries, you can identify it. For example, if you're creating a vacation, or if you're working for a client which is going live in multiple countries like US and Australia, then you can use US vacation and then AU vacation, something like that. So I'm just going to give a name, vacation demo. That's the name. And then you have accrual type. We have 3 types in the drop down. One is hours, days, and money. Money is not frequently used, but at times you may come across this, but we are going to focus more on hours and days. and the policies also which we are going to create will be based on the hours and days as well. So what do you mean by accrual type where it says hours and days? Well, typically it depends on how you want to accrue those hours, whether the hours are, or rather the vacation hours, vacation is going to be accrued in hours, or the vacation is going to be accrued in days. For example, if you're working with a client in US, mostly it's going to be the hours, but if you're working with some client in Asia, they here everything is in days, right? So your vacation or sick or personal, it all depends whether they are in hours or days. So the first thing is you need to determine whether it's going to be in hours or days. If it is hours, then you don't have to do anything because that's the default option that you see here, and hours per day will be grayed out. But if you select days, then you can also define whether one day is equivalent to 9 hours or one day equals to 8 hours a day. So I'll keep it as 8 hours a day, so that means one day equals to 8 hours, and I'm going to put this as hours. So let's assume that this vacation is going to be in hours, and then you have this option called as allow manual edits. The best practice here is to always go with the default option. The default option, as you can see, is checked, and this one is you don't have to worry about this. This one is not much used in the HTML version of the application, but previously in the classic view we were using it, where but now you don't have to put a check mark here. The only check mark required is the allow manual edit. What it does is it allows the administrators, like the HR administrator or the payroll administrator or or any other who have access to make changes to the accruals. It allows them to edit the accruals. For example, if you go to your time card, here in the time card you see there is accruals action. So the options that you see here, which is reset, it will allow you to reset the accruals, like vacation. Maybe if you want to change from 8 hours to 16 hours for some reason, then for that to happen you need to check this. If you uncheck this, then you will not be able to reset accruals, because for this particular accrual code you said do not allow manual edits. So that is the functionality of this, where you can check in the time cards or on your landing page as well. You will see an option which allows you to change the right here. So you can update your accruals or you can reset your accruals as well, depending on whether you have this defined or you have selected this or not. So once you give all these options, one is the name, the accrual type, and then you have the default one. You can simply click on save or return. Now one important thing, again, the accrual codes, the name has to be unique. You cannot have any special characters when you give your or define your name. Now once you give or have created your accrual, now you may wonder, where do we assign these accrual codes? Where is it used? Now accrual codes are used are assigned in the accrual policies. You can also use them. I'll show you right away accrual policies so that you get an idea. So once you create your accrual, so you can see here accrual. So this is the only one that we have, so it has taken by default, and it also shows hours, right? So if we would have created multiple accrual codes, you would have seen that in the drop down. So this is where you will have to assign or use that accrual code, and each policy that you're going to create needs one accrual code. So you will have to create that at the beginning itself. So that's the very first building block that we have seen, which is accrual codes. The next one is dates. When you come to dates, you will notice that there are two different type of dates importantly, okay, which is site-wide dates, and then you have person-specific dates. So these are the two important dates that we have. Now, one important thing I would also like to tell, so that you are aware of how, if you are somebody who is new or learning Kronos accruals, that accruals are so to speak date driven. Everything works on a particular date, and on that day the accruals kind of the system triggers the grant, or it kind of makes particular action on that particular day. So dates are very important when it comes to accruals, because as in when you progress with this course, you will understand that everything is date driven, and when you do testing as well, you will specifically check on a particular date, because date plays a very important role in accruals. And then you have site-wide dates. Let's talk about it first. The site-wide date is generally used for all your employees, or for majority of your employees. For example, if you want to use a date as a reference for a particular accrual event, for example, you want to the most common one that you must be you all must have experiences, even though you might not have done a configuration, but you may be working in some organization and you get vacation hours, and every year, let's say on January 1st, a certain amount of vacation gets rolled over or carried forward to the next year, right? And maybe you may based on the company norms or policies, you may lose certain vacation hours in case if you do not use it. So Jan 1st is the date when that carry forward happens. So that is the site-wide date, because on Jan 1st for everyone it happens, right? But and likewise for anything else, for example, on January 1st, or maybe on April 1st, or any other date that has some significance in your accrual policy, you can define that here, and that will be valid for all your employees. Now, person specific date, the person specific date is specific to the person, right? The name itself suggests that it is person specific. For example, the hire date will be different for different employees, right? They may be employees who may join on the same date, but everyone can have a different hire date. Now, hire date you cannot edit an hire date, right? So because every employee will have a hire date and you cannot change that. But at times you may need to create another person specific date so that you can override that. For example, I can make it as accrual start date. I can name it as accrual start date, and for certain reasons you may have to override the accrual your accrual date, so that the grant that you may want to give to your employee works in a different way. To give you an example, imagine you have a senior director joining your organization, and you have your accruals based on the length of service. So you, based on your tenure, you get you get your grants, vacation grant. For example, if you work for the first 5 years, you get let's say 120 hours in a year. If you work more than 5 years, then you get 200 hours in a year. So if a senior director joins, he will be getting, because it's a first year till 5 years, he will be getting 120 hours. But because he has already spent almost 20 years before joining your organization, he may ask that, no, I cannot take 120 hours, because though I am going to join your organization now, but I want my vacation or PTO to be 200 hours because I have more 20 years of experience. In those scenarios, you need to override his hire date. Now again, as I said, you cannot override the hire date, so that means you need to create a kind of alias for that, and you can name it as accrual start date, and then you can override this one, and I'll show you right away. you can go to your people editor. In the people editor, if you see, this employee will have something called as person's dates. In the person's date, you will see, let me just refresh this. There you go, accrual start date, right? So now whatever is the employee's hire date, I can override this with another date. So that is exactly, and then from that particular accrual start date, the grant will start to kick in, not from the actual hire date. So that is the significance where you may have to create different person specific dates. You may have to create a, for your terminations as well, so that on that particular date the termination will happen, and then whatever balance you have, that will be paid out to the employee. So site-wide date, again, if you want to add something, you can click on this plus and click on insert arrow. If you want to delete something, you can click on next. So let's say you are creating one and creating one for a grant which is going to be paid, which is going to get a vacation grant, which will be at the end of the month. Okay, some clients may say that they get vacation not on the first day of the month, but on the last day of the month. In that case, then you can say, you can name it as January or Jan, whatever you want to name it as, January 31st, or you can also name it as month end. Okay, so it's you can have whatever naming convention you want to give it here, the best that you can understand. So if I say month end, then I can, or if you want to put it as January 31st, okay, so then I can give here as, I can change this to Jan 31st, and then I can keep it backdated, or you can want to give it as, so every month, though we are giving Jan 31st, but you may wonder what about Feb and March, so on and so forth. Every month it is going to take the last day of the month if you choose this site-wide date. So I would prefer to name it as month end, so not to have any confusion. So we've created one person specific dates and one site-wide dates. Whenever you create any accruals configuration, you will have a lot of different dates. So because the same dates can be used by different maybe if you're working for multiple countries, so you can use the same date. So that's why you don't have to give any country prefix here. You don't have to put US, or you don't have to put AU for Australia, or NZ for New Zealand, IN for India. You don't have to do that, because the same dates can be used for multiple projects that you're working on for the same client, and if you're in the same environment. So let's save this. Okay, it's saying please provide a valid date for the field date. Okay, so did I give Jan 31st? Okay, so the date format is M/TD/YYY, so you have to make sure that you follow the right date format as well. There we go. So let's go to the next building block, which is date patterns. Click on new. Now the date pattern is, let me tell you, this is one of the most important building blocks. The reason why I say this is one of the most important building blocks, because a lot of things can go wrong in your configuration if your date pattern is incorrectly set up. Yes, you heard that right. If you do not create your date patterns correctly, then your grant, your configuration, while you're testing, it can have some impact on it. And not that is one aspect of date pattern. The other thing is the date patterns are used throughout the accruals. For example, the date pattern will be used in your probation periods. It will be used in your limits, grants, accrual policies. At the same time, you will be using date patterns in the balance cascades as well. So you can see once you create date patterns, it will be used in 4 or 5 places. So that would mean that you may need to create more than one date pattern, because you may have different building blocks that you may have to create. For example, as I said, grants, limits, and for your length of service, and to meet different conditions. So you may have to create different date patterns. Okay, so let's go and create one. We will name it as vacation. Okay, so I just name it as same as the accrual code, which is I'm sorry, so this is the date pattern, not the accrual code or the accrual policies. So the naming convention, again, the reason why I said gave vacation is because eventually we will create a vacation policy, but the date pattern should be something like monthly on the 1st, or just like the way we created that reference date, which is on the month end. So you can say yearly or monthly on the last day of the month, or Jan 1st annually on Jan 1st. So the date pattern should actually tell or convey what this date pattern is going to do, what action it is going to take. So for example, if you say annually on Jan 1st, so I would know that there is the pattern of this particular date pattern is going to happen annually, and when annually or when yearly, it's going to be on Jan 1st. So you can name it as yearly on Jan 1st, or each year Jan 1st, so that when you go to a particular building block and you have to use this, you would know that this is the one that you have to select. And it's always good to also mention whether any other things. For example, if you're creating a date pattern for pay periods, so it's important that you mention pay period bi-weekly or semi-monthly or weekly, or again any other combination that you want to use. So it is always good to be more precise when you are naming the date pattern. The next one is reference date. The reference date is the date building block. The one that you create here is used as a reference date in the date pattern. So if you remember, we created two. One is the accrual start date, and one is the other one that we created, which is the month end. So you can select based on what is your requirement. So I'm just going to keep it as default because we are just covering or creating a building block. We're not going to tag it to actual accrual policies at this point in time. So reference date is nothing but the date building block that you have created. So what it means is annually on Jan 1st, the reference date is accrual start date, which is from which is the building block that we just created, which is dates, and accrual start date is nothing but the employee's hire date. Then the frequency. So if you are going to tag this date pattern to a vacation grant, so his employee is going to get this frequency. Obviously based on the name, you will have to select years. But if you're creating something which is monthly, then you will have to select month, pay period wise, so on and so forth. Okay, so when you select year and you have this number, that means one frequency of this year. So if I say 2, or for example, let me say change this to monthly on Jan 1st, and then I'll change it to months. So if I put here as month 1, that means it's going to, the frequency will be month each month, or 1 month. If I make this as 3, that would mean the frequency will not be each month, it's going to be 3-month frequency. So it will be Jan, then it will count the 3rd month. So you might want to use a very good feature that you have in the date pattern itself, which is called preview. So if I change this to month and if I say 1 and click on preview, it's going to tell me from today's date when is the next iteration or when is the next time this date pattern is going to again put the grant value, if in case if you're going to attach this date pattern to a grant. So you can see 4:30, 5:30, 6:30, that is June 30th, July, and so on and so forth. But if I change this to 3, you will notice that it's not going to be each month, but it will be on April 30th, then is going to be on July 30th, October 30th. So if you want to, so the reason I'm sharing this is so that you know that if you have a grant which is, let's say, should be getting paid something on a quarterly basis, then you can use the frequency month as 3, and based on your requirement you can change it as well. So I'm just going to keep it as 1. And then you have something called as pattern start. Pattern start is start of reference date, so it's going to check the reference, whatever is the reference date. In our context it is the hire date. And then you also have few more options here, which is these 3. So what it does is, based on certain requirements, maybe you will, as in when you progress in your experience about accruals, you will see that there are different scenarios. So at times, to meet those scenarios, you may have to use one of them. So what it does is, I'll just explain you 1 or 2 so that it helps you to understand the pattern start. For example, you have this pattern start which is start on or after the reference date, and let's say that I gave the day of month to start as 5th. So it says start on or after the reference date. So reference date, let's say the reference date is 10th. Let's say the employee has joined on 10th of April. Okay, so a reference date is April 10th, and if you're given the pattern start as start on or after reference date, so it's going to start on May 5th. Okay, because you're saying it should start on or after the reference date. So the reference date is already after the month, which is 5th. So it's going to go to the next one and check the next month 5th. So the date pattern will trigger on May 5th. Likewise, you can select start on or before the reference date, and if the reference date is on the 10th, then you will see it's going to kickstart on the 5th. And then you can also do the preview and you will get to see all the dates that are there. So importantly, you may use most of the time the pattern start as the start of the reference date, but in some scenarios, as and when you progress, you come across different requirements, then you may have to explore and choose these options while you do your configuration or while you are testing. So date patterns, once you create this, let me show you where you can use this. So you created this, so let's say we have these 3. So date patterns will be used in multiple places, but importantly you will have to for length of service or for your grants limits. For example, if you just go to accrual policies, you will notice that in the accrual policies, in the length of service, you see here monthly on Jan 1st. So we are not going to use this for length of service, but I was just suggesting or telling you where, once we create the accrual policy, where do we assign it. So one of the places could be length of service, and then you also have grants, then you have limits, and then you also have your balance cascade where this date pattern will be used. Okay, so that is in the date patterns. Then next you have balance cascade. Now at this point in time we do not have anything, so I will get back on this balance cascade, because the way balance cascade work is it allows you to pay out something. For example, you may have vacation, and if the employee is leaving the organization, you may want to pay out that. So you can use this to pay out, and I will be covering this with a simple scenario so that you understand once we have some data. So this would, I will keep this for the last so that you understand it in a better way. So let's move on to balance cascade and balance cascade group. I will cover this at the end so you get an idea of it. Probation periods. So probation period, as you can simply guess it from the name itself, it's about probation. So in your organization, if your employees have to serve or have to be on probation for 3 months or 6 months, and only after that they can go on leave, so that's when you can use probation periods. Some organization they have 60 days, 90 days, again it depends on the company policy. So again, your naming convention will come into picture. So let's say I say 90 days probation period. There you go. So I have that, and then the type is single. Probation ends after you can say here 1, or if you're using days, or you can say 3, and then you have to use a date pattern here. So currently we do not have a date pattern, so I'll just show you quickly how you can create this date pattern for probation period. So let's say you have to create a probation period 90 days. You don't have to say 90 days probation period because this 90 days can be used elsewhere as well. So and then you can simply say days as 90. So 90 days from date of hire. So that's where the probation ends. You can click on save and return, and then you can go to your probation period, and then you can say new, and here you can give your 90 days probation period. Now you can say probation ends after 190-day period. Okay, so this 90 days is a date pattern, so we are saying probation ends after 190 days period. Now along with this, there are other options that can also be used, and those are nothing but the qualifiers. So qualifiers are not generally used, so based on my experience I have only seen it very seldomly used, but it all depends on your clients, right? So a company may have a policy where they may say that once you join the organization you will be on 90 days. So in this 90 days you would not be able to take any leaves. Having said that, before I get into qualifiers, having said that, during your 90 days period you will still start to accrue your vacations. You will get your accruals will keep happening. The only thing is that you cannot use it. So you can, when you see your accrual balance, you can still see that, but only thing is that you cannot use it because it's not available to you. And the way the system shows you the accrual balance, it shows in brackets with a P symbol. I'll show you. I have taken a screenshot of it for you, so you can see that this is the vacation, and here you can see that the sick hours, or the right here you can see this, it's in bracket with a P, right? On the time card also it shows like this with a bracket, and it shows so 20 hours of vacation, but it's in bracket with the P symbol. P is nothing but for probation. So this is how it shows. So wherever you see any hours in or in brackets with the P there, that means this is something that the employee cannot use it at the moment, but because the employee is in probation period. Okay, so that is one more thing that I wanted to tell, that while you are in your probation you will still accrue it, but only thing is that after you complete your 90 days only then you can use it. Coming to the qualifiers, now the way qualifier work is, let me give you a scenario that the client may, or your organization or the client that you're working with may say that hey, we have a 90-day probation period, but we want the employees to be working in this 90 days for at least 35 hours each week, okay, or maybe 5 days each week. If they don't work, let's say 35 hours each week, then the probation period will not get over. It will extend. Okay, so the qualifier, you can say in this scenario, the one that I said, which is employee should be working for at least 35 hours every week. So I can say hours in pay code, which is greater than or equals to 35, and the pay code that I'm going to use is regular hours, and period to check is weekly, and then total range of the day I'll say 10, and minimum occurrence I will make it as 8. Okay, so now what this means, whatever I have given there, what that means is I am going to check 8 times out of 10 times. I'm going to check 8 times, and in these 8 times, which is going to be weekly, employee should be working for minimum of 35 hours in his regular pay code. So when you work, typically hourly employees, when they punch in, punch out, you get a pay code that gets generated, right? So in that pay code, it should have at least 35 hours. Now this 8 occurrences of the weeks can be first week, second week, third week, because I haven't defined whether it should be consecutive or not. So if I say consecutively, that means right from his joining till straight away 8 weeks, he should be working at least for 35 hours. But if I say in any order, it could be in the 10 occurrences, at least 8 occurrences, he should be working for 35 hours minimum. Likewise, you can use other options as well if need be. So that is a qualifier. If the employee meets this qualifier, then after 90 days his probation period will end, and then he is now free to use his earned accruals, right? So that is your probation period. So let's save it. Now once you create your probation period, where do we assign it? We assign it in your accrual policies. So if you go to your accrual policies, you will see that here there is probation period. You can tag it here, right? So remember, whatever you create, at the end of the day, you have to attach it to your accrual policies, like the way we did for your date pattern. You can have your date pattern, you can have your probation period. We created the accrual code, so you attached it here. Next one is limits. Limits are another very important building block, because probation period can be subjective. Your organization may have it or not, but limit is something that you will definitely have to use it. So let's check what. So there are basically 3 different types of limits. One is the earning amount limit, earning balance limit, and then you have the taking limit or the carryover limit. And then these two, so to speak, there are 5 different types, but not everything you are going to use out of this. Okay, so the one that is defaulted, which is earning balance limit, is just like the way it tells by the naming convention, earning balance limit. So it means that how much balance can your accruals, or rather let's say accrual, if there is a bucket, let's say a vacation bucket, how much balance can it hold? So if you define earning balance limit, you don't have to put any radio button here. You just need to create this earning balance limit. You can just name it as EBL, or earning balance limit, and then you can assign it in your accrual policy. So for example, if you created this earning balance limit and gave the limit as 120 hours, so in a year your vacation balance cannot go more than 120. You may continue to accrue the hours, maybe on a monthly basis or pay period wise, but you cannot have a balance more than 120. Then you have earning amount limit. Now earning amount limit is specifically mentioning about how much you can earn. It's not about the balance that you can hold, your bucket can hold, but how much you can earn. For example, in a rolling period of, let's say, 365 days, or maybe you can say in a pay period, okay, maybe in 90 days, or maybe in a 1 year or 6 months date pattern that you have created, you can earn only up to 100 hours, or maybe certain number of hours that you can earn. So earning amount limit is how much you can earn, right? For example, if in each pay period or monthly you earn 10 hours of vacation each month, so you can put a limit for a particular date pattern, or maybe for a limit over a rolling period of time, that during this this 90 days you can earn only up to 60 or 50 or 40 hours or whatever it is. Then you have carryover limit. The carryover limit is, let's say you have carryover limit on Jan 1st, the very first example that I gave of carryover. On Jan 1st, your vacation, whatever balance is left of 2020, it gets carried over to 2021, and then for 2021 you get new entitlement, right? So that is what the this particular limit type is all about, where you can create a carryover limit on a particular date pattern. So if you see date patterns, they are used quite frequently in limits, grants, accrual policies, probation period. So that's why I said it is one of the most important building blocks. Now coming to these 3 radio buttons that you see, there are 3 radio buttons. The first one is maximum. That means how much can you carry forward from your 1 year to another year. For example, if you say 120, or maybe you can say 100, so that means maximum that you can carry forward from 1 year to another year is 100 hours. So if you have 113 hours, then 13 hours will be lapsed. Then you also have, at times some employees may go into negative, so you can say maximum and forgive negative. So if you have, let's say, 24 hours left, so you can carry forward 24, but if you, let's say you have -5 by the end of 2021, 2020, you had -5 as your vacation balance. So the maximum and forgive negative balance will move nothing, because we are saying forgive negative, so -5 will not be carried forward. But if you select minimum, and if you say minimum you can carry forward is -10, that means you can carry forward, if you have -16 as the balance, then you can carry forward up to -10 to the next year. But then that would also mean that you do not have any upper capping, or you do not have any capping for the positive amount. Let's say if you have 200 hours left, you can carry forward everything, right? But in maximum, this is the most commonly used one, you can put the maximum amount that you can carry forward is only 100 hours. Beyond 100 hours you cannot carry forward anything, it will be lapsed. Usually companies have up to 40 hours or 45. They do not want to carry forward much, because then again it will be a liability for them, because they have to pay if the employee do not use them, right? So these are the carryover limit. Then you have cap on earnings minus taking. So this one is a very not commonly used, but this one is what I feel is if ever it has to be, then you are working in a company which is very much promotes work-life balance. So imagine you have an employee, you have a company policy where you say the cap on earnings minus taking limit is set to 60 hours, right? So you assign cap on earning minus taking as 60 hours. So what that means is, if you have 100 hours as of today, and then you have used 40 hours, then what's the difference? The difference is 60, which is exactly cap on earning minus takings, which is 60. So your limit is set to 60, and you've had 100 hours and you've taken 40. Now the limit is 60. So imagine next month, in the month of May, you get 10 more hours, right? Then your cap on earning minus takings will become how much? Because 10 is added, so your difference will increase to 70, right? So because you haven't taken anything, so the cap on earning minus takings will now have to be within a limit of 60. So the 10 hours that you're going to get will be lapsed. Okay, so system will cannot put that against your balance because the limit itself is 60. So you need to take the balance, or that means you need to go on vacation. You need to go on one more day of vacation so that you get the remaining balance. So if you take more, you can get it. If you do not take more, then you cannot get it because you keep earning and you do not take. So the earning and the taking limit, the threshold that is set, if it goes beyond that, you will lose. So that's why I said companies who promote work-life balance, they may want to use this. Then finally you have taking limit. So let's say you say for a particular type of leave, let's say sick leave or maybe personal leave or any other type of leave, you cannot take more than, let's say, 30 hours in 90 days period. Okay, so the taking limit, how much you can take in, or it can also be at one go, or maybe in one particular request time off that you do, whether you can take more than X number of hours, or maybe in a particular pay period, as I said, or as a whatever the date pattern that you define, or maybe in a rolling period of X number of days. So when you define the number, so the system will check whether, let's say, 90 days. In 90 days you cannot take more than 36 hours of vacation. The moment it is going beyond 36, the system will throw you an error, taking limit violation, something like that. Now the 36 amount that I mentioned, you cannot let's say I just give taking limit, you cannot give that here. Okay, the taking limit has to, the amount of 36 hours as I mentioned, has to be given in your policy. So this is where you need to attach that taking limit. Okay, so you have this maximum taking limit, so you can give your taking limit here, and then you can say whatever is the disallow amount, 36 hours or 40 hours, whatever you want to give. You can also put a warning limit. So we'll see all of these later, but the point is, where do you attach that? The one that we just created is what I want to show you. And if you would have created a carryover limit, then carryover limit would have shown here under this limit section. So that is your limits, where you can create different type of limits. Again, quite frequently you will have to use different limits to meet your accrual policy requirement. Alright, then moving on, next one is the grants. There are two types of grants. One is a fixed grant, The default one is the fixed grant that you will see, and then you have the earn grant. Okay, so let's talk about the earn grant. The earn grant, as it says, it is something, the grant is given to you uh, based on certain, let's say, condition. Okay, I can say something like that, yeah, based on certain condition. For example, you need to earn it to get that grant. The perfect example that I can give you is for working on a statutory holiday. So for example, if you're working on a statutory holiday, you may get double pay, or you may get let's say compensatory off, comp off, right? So you can use a earn grant for that, and I will show you how this is done. We can take this as an example. If you're working on a statutory holiday, you get a compensatory off for that, so that you can compensate for working on that. So for that you need to use earn grant, because the action is dependent on some other action. So you're working on a statutory holiday, and because you're working there, this particular pay code, whatever you give for statutory holiday, we have to use that, and then we need to create another policy for that. So I'm going to take this as one of the examples, and I'll show you how we can create this in part 3 that I spoke about some more concept. As I said, I'm going to show you how to create an earn grant. So now let's focus on the fixed grant, which is something that you will be using in almost all your policies. You need to create a fixed grant, because based on the fixed grant, let's say you're creating a vacation grant, which is going to give you a vacation on a pay period basis or monthly basis, then you need to create a fixed grant. So what do you mean by grant type? Okay, so same thing which I said, earn grant or fixed grant, and then you have the date pattern. As I said, if you remember, date patterns are most important ones because they are used across the building block of accruals. So let's say you're creating a vacation that you give to your employees on a monthly basis. Okay, so you can say monthly on 1st, and I can just name it as vacation if you want to give it as that. But if you want to make it general so that you can use it for your others, then you don't have to give any specific name. So I can just name it as monthly on 1st. That means this grant is going to grant the vacation each month on the 1st. Okay, and then it says award grant. Would it be one-time grant or would it be repeatedly? Okay, and should it expire, should it not expire? And then you have few more options here. We are not going to go through all of these because this would need some level of understanding of the accrual concept. So for now, if you are at a beginner level, or if you are starting to understand how accrual works, so this one will be the most convenient and easy way to understand by making it more simple. So award grant, whether it is one time or repeatedly, for example, each month on the 1st you get 10 hours, so then you will be using repeatedly. But certain grant could be one time. For example, you may get one time on the higher day, or maybe in the higher month. Okay, so depending, some clients may have certain condition that if you are hired in the first week, or maybe in the first few days, then you may get X number of hours. But if you join in the later part of the month, then you may get X number of hours. So but then from next month onwards, it will be 10 hours each month. But for the first month, they should be proration, so to speak. Okay, the grant should be prorated based on the day when you join. So that means you need to create a grant which will be one time, because that grant is going to be only for the higher month. From next month onwards is going to be 10 hours each month, so you don't have to make any kind of put any kind of conditions there. So if it is that's where you might use one-time grant, a one-time only. For example, in such scenarios where you want to have some proration. Repeatedly means this grant is going to be monthly, each month on first. Yeah, again, the date pattern you may have to change it based on your requirement. Here it says monthly on Jan 1st, but it should be monthly on 1st of the month, not just Jan 1st. I'm just going to click on save and return so that I can show you where you can tag this. So you can go to Accrual Policies, click on new, and right here you see grants. So if I click on the drop down, you will see monthly on 1st, and then you can give how much the employee should be getting. That is 10 hours. So you can just give 10 here. That means based on the length of service, let's say on the length of service is yearly, so yearly from Jan 1st, so the employee is going to get every month 10 hours for, and if there is any length of service change, for example after 5 years the employee will be getting 12 hours each month, then you will see the length of service here. But as of now I haven't given anything. You will see that now. Okay, so this one is just taking a while. Yeah, so for the initial first year till 5 years you may get 10 hours, but then from the next year onwards you can add, and then you can say from 5th year your grant will be 12 hours or maybe 13 hours, something like that. So I'll cover this in more detail, but for now you can understand where how you create the grant, the grant building block, and where is that assigned. Okay, so this is where it gets assigned in the grants, and whenever you add something, the system will refresh, or it will kind of refresh the page again. It won't wipe out your detail, but as you can see, the moment I add this new row, it will, and add this, then it will kind of reload, would be the right word. It will reload that page again, so that you can add whatever is that. That can be annoying at times because you have to add so many rows for some reason. Then it will keep reloading the page again and again. So back to grants. So there are two types of grants. One is the fixed grant, one is the earned grant. Okay, and without grant you cannot create an accrual policies. Yes, you can create for some policies where you do not want to grant anything. It is done manually, then you don't have, but more often than not in almost all your policies you need to create your grants. So once you are done with your accrual codes, dates, date patterns, probation period, limits, grants, then we go to the accrual policies itself. Okay, so here we go. So whatever accrual policies you want to create, you can give a name to that. Again, one important thing is when you create an accrual policy, the next step will be to assign it to the accrual profile, right? So when you assign a accrual policy to the accrual profile, you need to make sure that in the accrual profile you cannot have two accrual policies which has the same accrual code. What I mean by that is, for example, you have vacation and vacation bank. Both those policies should have a different accrual code, because in one accrual profile you cannot have two policies with the same accrual code. Okay, so for that reason you need to make sure that you have different accrual codes if you are creating for each accrual policies. So you can create a accrual policy for, let's say, vacation. So you will give your accrual code as vacation. If there is any probation period, you will assign the probation period. If there is not, you can just leave it as is. Then the length of service, based on whatever is the length of service, you will choose that. And then grant, the grant what we've just created, you will give the grant value. And then limits, there was one limit that we created which was taking limit, but if you have a limit for let's say carryover, then that is where you will see here. Then you have takings, which is your vacation hour. So you are actually attaching a pay code. So you can see this is a pay code, not a accrual code. This is a pay code, because you need to understand that when end user goes to the application and they go to the request time of page, they do not select accrual code, they select the pay code, vacation hours. And so you are kind of tagging that accrual code to this pay code, so that when the employee applies for 1 day of vacation, then this 8 hours will be deducted from your accrual code. So for that reason you need to create your pay codes as well. So if you want to know about pay codes, then you can see the 20 days of Kronos configuration series. In day 1 we've created the pay codes. And then you have minimum taking limit. So this vacation policy that you're creating, should it have any minimum taking limit? For example, minimum you should be taking at least 4 hours. Okay, you cannot take 3 hours at one go. No, it's not allowed. Okay, so you can take minimum 4, you can go 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, but you cannot take just like 2 hours. No, company policy says you can take only minimum 4 at one go of your requesting time off. Taking increment, whether again you want to add an increment to it, like again 4, 8, 12, in case if you want to. This is an increment, this is not a minimum taking limit, but this is an increment. If you say 4, then the next increment will be 8 likewise. Restore taking is you've taken the vacation, but you can also restore it after a certain number of days, whether you want to restore each taking or all takings from the start. So if you say each taking, now vacation may not be a good example to show you this, but some leaves like bereavement leave, right? So bereavement leave, you may get 16 hours of bereavement leave or 2 days of bereavement leave, but again you want to take that bereavement leave because of another time, so you can restore it. So you've taken 16 hours, then after 2 days those 16 hours will be restored, and then again you can take those for if you happen to apply for it again. So that's a restore taking. You may use it for not all types of accrual policies, but as I said, maybe for scenarios like this where you may have to refill their bucket so that they can use it again. And then you have maximum taking limit. If you remember, we created this maximum taking limit where it tells you that you can, let's say, based on the pay period, based on the date pattern that you define here, you can say that maximum 36 hours you can take in the last 6 months. Rolling period is 6 months or 180 days, and the moment employee reaches 35 hours or maybe 30 hours, you can create a warning for the employee. Then you have these overdrafts. You can give overdraft of, let's say, 24 or maybe 24, and future overdraft as disallow overdraft amount as the same 24. What it means is, this number is that how much negative can you go. For example, I have 100 hours that I have, and I've utilized all 100 hours. Now I do not have anything in my bucket. but you can still go minus 24. I can still apply for 1 day, I can still apply for the second day, and likewise I can apply till 24 hours in negative, or maybe 40 hours in negative, or maybe just 0. Okay, if I say 0, that means you cannot go in overdraft. System will disallow anything beyond if it goes in negative, right? So that is what this two option means. And then you have the warning amount in case you want to put warning amount, but this will just do what you want to do, right? If you want to allow overdraft, you can give a overdraft here. Let's say you can maximum go 8 hours in negative, then you can give that, right? So those overdrafts, these are the two options that you would be using. Even if you do not have overdraft, make sure that you put 0 here. Okay, so do not just leave it as is, just put a value here, and even if you don't have any overdraft, just make sure you put 0. Okay, so that is how you create a vacation. Let me just name it as vacation hours. So once you create this, click on save and return, and then the last thing you would do is create the accrual profiles. So but before I create the accrual profiles, as I said, I will just show you balance cascade and balance cascade group. The way balance cascade work is, by the way, let me show you something. So you can see there is something called as cascading policies, right? And there is something called as balance cascade. So when you create your accrual policies, you may have to use, especially if you have something like vacation bank, which you are using in a different accrual code, you may have to at times use cascading policies. And what exactly it does, cascading policy, I'll show in part 3. That's where I said that I'm going to show you more concepts of accrual, so you get to be familiar. But the reason I showed you is because here also the term is cascade, and here also it says cascade. But to give you a quick overview of what this cascade means, this cascade means cascading from one bucket to another bucket. Okay, for example, you have sick and vacation. You need to take 5 days of sick leave, but you do not have, you just have, let's say 16 hours. Let's say you just have two days of 16 hours left out of the 40 hours that you want under you sick. So then I can create a cascading policy where if you do not have enough balance, it checks the balance in the next bucket, let's say vacation, and then it will take you, it will still allow you to take your 40 hours. It won't stop you from taking your 40 hours of sick leave. Balance cascade is cascading the entire balance into another, let's say, pay code, generally used for termination purpose, where while termination you may want to pay out the leftover or unused vacation hours. So let's say you have 72 hours of vacation balance left. Now the employee has left, you need to pay those 72 hours. So you will move those balance of 72 hours from your vacation accrual code to vacation encashment pay code. So that is the balance cascade that you will do. So let's click on new, and then you can name it as, usually it is used for your vacation. Okay, so on your termination date, that means you need to create a termination date pattern, right? So on the particular date, which is on your termination date, let's say this is the date pattern is on termination date, whatever accrual balance you have in your vacation accrual code, all of that will be deducted from your vacation and will be paid out to your vacation. You can create another pay code called vacation encashment. So what we are doing is, as you can see, I just filled some numbers here. This is 0 and this is 100. So let's assume this is a termination date. I can create one and show you later on, but for now, just to understand that on the termination date, all the balance, cascade balance amount from your vacation, let's say here you have 72 hours. Now all these 72 hours you are going to cascade this 100% and you're going to reduce this 72 hours which you have under vacation, and you're going to create a cascading order that is from this vacation which has 72 hours, you're going to reduce this and then pay out in another pay code called as vacation. Okay, so if somebody is leaving on 30th of April, the system will see it's 30th of April based on the termination date, termination record that you will get from your HRIS system, and then this payout will happen. Okay, so I will be creating this and sharing more real life example, but just to show you what this building block has, I created this vacation hours encashment, and now I'm going to create the balance cascade group, because without this you cannot assign it. So you need to create this balance cascade, save and return. Okay, so balance cascade is nothing but whatever you created in the balance cascade, you will need to assign it here. The only important thing that you need to remember is if there are multiple balance cascades that you're creating, then you need to assign it in the order in which they should take place. For example, you may want to first reduce it from a particular accrual code and then later pay out in some other accrual code. So you will use the reduce one first and then you will use the encashment in the second one. So using this buttons, you will have to move them up and down. So once you have created your all your building blocks, the last building block that you have is accrual profiles. So just go here and click on accrual profiles and give it a name. Now when it comes to the naming convention for your profiles, you cannot name it as vacation, sick or personal. Well, you can do that certainly, but more often than not the naming convention is more depending on the group of employees. For example, you may have employees who are full-time employees, they may have part-time employees, right? Or you may have contractors who may just need to have sick, they don't have personal or vacation. So depending on the employee group, right? And for example, in Asian countries you have maternity leave and paternity leave. So obviously the male employees should not have maternity leave and female employees should not have paternity leave. So that means you need to create groups, different group of different accrual profiles, maybe again based on your employee genders, right? So your accrual profile should have should be created based on the group of employees who are going to use it. I'm just going to name it as full-time employees. So here we go, full-time employees. I just name it as, and then the policy is the one that we created, and then you have this option called as display and make it hidden, right? So you can see that here you have display and hidden. So if you make it as hidden, so obviously it will not be shown, but if you make it as visible, it will be shown on the time card, right? And elsewhere on your on the time card where you can see under the accruals section right here. It will be hidden, visible based on this option. Now you may wonder why you may want to hide some policies. Well, you will definitely have to create some hidden policies, and those policies would be some qualifiers or some policies that you may create to meet some other policy, to meet the requirement of some other policies, right? And then you have the balance cascade group where you will attach the balance cascade that we just created. So once this is done, you can click on save and return. Now, do you remember the last step? Now you created the accrual profile. Now what do we do with this accrual profile? Where do we assign this? So if you remember, we assign this in the people editor under your accruals and leave, and this is where you need to just refresh it. There you go, full-time employees, and then you can give a start date and end date, and then you can save it. Okay, let me just do that and show you so that you can actually see it happening, and you can give it a end date as forever. And I'm going to save this now. So once I go to the employees, there we go. Can you see this? We just created these accruals, and you have this this is the accrual code that we gave, vacation demo, and the unit was in hours, and then it created some numbers here based on the policy that we would have given there, right, in the policy. So you can see so we are not worrying about the numbers and all that. All we wanted to know is how to create the different building blocks and how do we assign it. Now again, you cannot assign manually to all the employees, so you need to have a kind of a interface to assign all these profiles to all the employees at the time of the hiring. So this is the accrual profiles building accrual. This was the accrual profile, the last building block that we have seen, and next time when we're going to see in part 2, I'm going to share actual scenario. I'm going to create a couple of actual accrual policies based on some real life requirements from the clients. Okay, and we're going to create accrual policies. This one that we just created, it is just to show you how we can create it, but we're going to create based on the requirement, and I'm going to show you the requirement initially so that you know how or what is the end result that we're expecting, and then once we create, we're going to test everything, how much we are going to get it on the hire month, how much we should be getting each year, how much should it get carry forward, and how much balance it can store. Everything we are going to test that in part 2. So for now, accruals is, again, as I said, if you understand the basics of accruals, then it will become easy. So that's the reason we first went through all the building blocks. So in the next part it becomes easy. I don't have to explain everything again. We can just focus on creating the policy. Alright folks, that was all about the first part of accruals. Stay tuned for the next one. Till then, take care of yourself, and I'll see you.